I'm Mark Zickrey of Space Command and Mr. Sci-Fi and another thing. And I'm here today with two of my favorite people. Yay! Lenny Hochteil and my dear friend Tony. And so I guess let's start by both of you talking about how you first met me and how you've gotten involved in all of this. So Lenny, why don't you start?
Well, I got to get into my time machine and go back to the 1970s then. Mark and I went to the same high school, Hamilton High School in LA. And when we were graduating, I went to one college. I went to Los Angeles City College. And Mark, I guess, got into, what
UCLA.
college?
Yeah.
Yeah.
UCLA.
And one day we met up. Well, again, we were good friends in high school. And Mark was really the nerd back then, if you will. And
Yeah.
I bumped into Hollywood. We were in Hollywood. I didn't live too far from Hollywood. And we were right at a bookstore. He says, Lenny, I got to tell you great news. And I go, what? He says, I got the rights to do a book based upon Rod Serling's, based upon Rod Serling and then probably all the Twilight Zone episodes. I said, sure, Mark, sure. Okay, good. And about a year later, that same bookstore, there was his book right there. And so I've known Mark for a very long time, a lot of Comic-Cons. And my son Jeremy is a video editor. He also too was a mentor. Mark was a mentor to that too. So we've always bumped into each other at different book signings or something like that. So back in the 1970s.
Yeah. And then, of course, what makes this conversation germane is that you've been building science fiction cars, and we'll get into that and all of that history. So Tony, how did you come into the Zickrey-verse?
Well, you are the founder of the table, and which I was invited to, and I am so glad that I was able to have the opportunity to come to that meeting because I was working on a project and I was just looking for some information, and there you were, ready to go, and and from what I gathered, you had so much information and you're so willing to help out. So we've been kind of going ever since, Mark's been my mentor and just kind of guiding me in the right direction as far as my own projects as well. And when he heard that I was building race cars, he was like, huh, I wonder if you could build me a space car. And I was like, sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So here we are, man.
That's cool. That's really cool. And again, I've been a huge fan of science fiction cars since I was a kid, of course. And there aren't a lot of great ones, but the ones that are great are like just terrific, unforgettable. I was showing Lenny the Blade Runner, which is just so, and you were mentioning that you actually met the guy who built the spinner, right, Len?
Gene Winfield from Blade Runner, the original one, Harrison Ford. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So eventually we should build one of these suckers, because I think that would be super fun. And but again, I think what makes a science fiction car great is that it's distinctive, it's memorable, it's got something that's just unforgettable, and but also, ideally it should be in a good movie as well. It's like, because you have some great science fiction vehicles in really shitty movies like Damnation Alley. I mean, Damnation Alley, there's that big monster thing with all the wheels and so forth. And that used to be, that sat for years outside, that custom car place on Cahuenga, I guess it was, and it's gone now. But again, that wasn't a great movie. But then we get to Back to the Future and so forth. So, but I'll walk through a little bit of this stuff as preamble. Some of you know the story about when I was 16 and I went to this party to launch this alternative newspaper. And on one side of me was this Hell's Angel, like this 300-pound Hell's Angel with this big knife on his belt. And then to the left of me was this kind of mild bearded guy, soft-spoken bearded guy. So I decided that I would talk to him instead of the Hell's Angel because, if I hadn't, my life would have been very different. I'd be on my, my Harley Davidson right now. But that guy turned out to be a political cartoonist whose work I knew, and we hit it off, and he took me back to his place, and he had just been hired to do 10 concept paintings to sell a movie that a friend of his had written, and they were just freshly painted. They were lined up along the baseboard of his living room, and I saw them, and those were the 10 paintings that sold Alien. And that guy, of course, was Ron Cobb. And Cobb, of course, went on to be a significant designer in Star Wars and so on and so forth. But he also was one of the main designers on the DeLorean time machine in Back to the Future. And you've built, now you've built more than one of those, right? Tell me the history of that.
Well, I didn't build it. I have a builder. He's in Florida. Okay, Bruce Kuhlman. And there's probably maybe 3 to 4 really good builders of the DeLorean time machine. Early on, back in the 90s, they kept it a secret. There's one particular builder, and then other people started saying, well, where can we get this stuff? He said, no, I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to take away my business. But eventually they shared the resources, because I think the end result was, if you're going to build the time machine, you know, make it right. So if you didn't know where to get the parts, and then you compare it to somebody who knew where to get the parts, you put them together and they go, there's a big difference between them. Yeah. So, so that's now about 7, 8 years ago that I got involved in that. But just a side note, I know all these people that have built cars, or have people that built their cars, starting with the Batmobile, Herbie the Love Bug, Knight Rider, Ghostbusters, you name it, all the movies and TV shows. Okay.
Yes, and that was great. And you just mentioned some of the really great vehicles in the history of this, and it was fun because when I first met you, Tony, you know, and you mentioned that you might be interested in building a futuristic car. We went to the Peterson Museum, where they had this astonishing exhibit on science fiction vehicles, and that was just really spectacular. And so now, so getting back to you, Len, for a moment, how did you first get involved in how did this interest in these vehicles start, and how did it evolve?
Well, as I've said before, I've done some documentaries. I'm not a car person, but I go to a lot of car shows. And when the movie Back to the Future came out in 1985, about within maybe 20 minutes of the movie, out comes this DeLorean time machine out of a truck. And you just look at it and go, I got to get one of those. Okay. You know, it's just, you have a desire, a need, a dream. And my son Jeremy, loved playing with Legos, and I think that has a lot to do with you, Mark. The fact that people put things together and they dream one day of owning something like that. Yes. So I combined his dream and my dream, and finally, when I had enough money 8 years ago, I then had a DeLorean time machine made for me.
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool, and you know, it's really fun because you know, probably most people know the history of it. The DeLorean there was a guy named John DeLorean, and he built this very cool stainless steel car as a car that you could buy, and then he ran afoul of certain things, and that stopped. But then when they were doing Back to the Future, it was like, okay, what would be the coolest time machine you could think of? And the suggestion came up, well, a DeLorean that's kitted out as a time machine, and that's how you got that wonderful design. So
yeah, it's destiny or fate, because what happened is that Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis were coming up with a movie called Back to the Future. It was a different name, but that was the idea. And it was going to be a refrigerator. It was a time machine. It was going to be a refrigerator. Yeah. And somehow they realized that's not good, because as soon as the movie comes out, kids are going to open up a refrigerator, get in, and glock themselves in there.
Yes.
So they realized. We need something to drive. And it just happened, this was early 82 when they were writing the script, John DeLorean was in the newspaper. Wow. And there was a DeLorean. And Bob Gale points to it and says, that's what we need. That's very futuristic. That's what we want in our movie. Yeah. The next part, like I said, Ron Cobb really drew up a lot of things that would be on top or inside the DeLorean time machine. And then it got down to Kevin Pike. He was a special effects supervisor. They gave him a budget, and I think he was up in North Hollywood area, Van Nuys, North Hollywood area. And they said, "Here's how much you go find things to put on the car."
That's great.
And so that's how it was made. Yeah.
Wow. And Andy Probert was also one of the designers on it too. And
that's right.
And he was a big Star Trek guy and incredibly talented. So so cool. That's cool. And now you're building the last Starfighter car. You're having that put together.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept too. The good part about that, again, it was a movie 1984. Robert Preston was in it, great person, and he played Centauri. And this was a vehicle that was from a planet called Rylos, and they were looking to recruit starfighters. So another part of the thing is a video game, and this guy Alex, a young kid at high school going to college, played this video game, and he won. And there's some trigger, then all of a sudden the spaceship came down, and it's a car, but it just turns into a spaceship like that, called Star Car. That's the actual name of it. And the part I like about it is, again, it's got gold wing doors just like a DeLorean, and it's fun, fun car. And he invited Alex into the car, and they took off to Rylos to fight a war.
That's
so
great.
he recruited like
Yeah.
that. So same time period, 1984-85, I got the feeling that this is a movie that I really liked, and I would love to have a car like that. We'll go into what Tony's doing and Eric's doing. So the idea is, how do you make the car? What do you build from it?
Mm-hmm.
And I did talk to Gene several times. I read his book, and I talked to him several times. And they actually used a Volkswagen Beetle, is
Wow.
what they used.
Yep.
And that was popular back then.
Wow.
And
Yep.
they stretched it, and they went from there. Well, I called him up and I said, how about a Fiero?
Huh.
Will that work? He says, yeah, Fiero's pretty good for that.
Yeah.
And actually, in the movie Back to the Future Part 2, there's a police car, and he made that one for the movie. And
Wow.
it's a Fiero as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh, that's cool. And of course, Ron Cobb was the designer on that film as well. And he's one, and actually Ron has provided a design for our Shrike spacecraft. So we're using that in Space Command. So there's a wonderful continuity of this brilliant designer. You know, he also, of course, did Star Wars and Close Encounters and Alien and Aliens. I mean, just one of the great unsung heroes of science fiction films. So now we get to you, Tony. Okay, so so now, how did you get into this whole car thing and science fiction? Just talk about your background a little in those two regards.
Yeah, it's always something that I was into ever since I was, a kid. Actually, my earliest memory of actually getting in trouble in school because I was daydreaming after watching Star Wars. You remember those little the bikes the Ewoks used to ride?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't call it.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I was like, in my mind, I was gonna build one, right? So I would like pull junk from around the neighborhood trying to put one together. That's kind of where like my whole building idea came from, And then as far as cars go, I was always into, the 80s lore, as far as like the Knight Rider and Dukes of Hazzard and just, Smoking the Bandit, like just kind of all that stuff. And I was like, man, I want a cool car like that. And I just kind of started getting into vehicles when I was about 14. Just kind of messing around with my dad's old car in the garage, and I just kind of been tumbling down the rabbit hole ever since. So yeah, man, I just been so now I'm into drifting, drag racing, building cars with roll cages, custom motors, high performance motors, stuff like that. So this is quite an interesting change in scenery for me, but it's cool because once you build one fast car, I mean, it's just kind of like the same thing over and over and over. And this is like a change of atmosphere, change of scenery. So it's real cool, man. I really, really like what's going on here.
Yeah, well, it's really fun for me as well. And now my background, of course, I'm a science fiction geek from way back, as Lenny can attest. And knowing me in high school, it's both wonderful that we are still around and not in jail or other fates we could have had. But
man, right.
It's nice. Here we are. But from my background, I grew up from as far back as I can remember loving science fiction, and when there would be a science fiction vehicle, whether it was Blade Runner or some of these other things, or even the shuttlecraft in Star Trek, the vehicles were always very interesting. The spacecraft, the futuristic cars, and there were a lot of futuristic cars on science fiction book covers, that kind of stuff, And but also my dad was very into cars. He in Space Command in the pilot, there's a replica Bugatti that my dad actually built. And when back in the 50s, before I was around, my mom and my dad had an MG. And then when I was growing up, my dad had a Lotus Europa and a Carmen Ghia and so forth. So again, he was, involved in that whole thing, and we'd go to car shows. So I was very aware of cars. And as a kid, I knew about Chuck Barris and a lot of these really, inventive car designers, and always whenever there'd be some documentary about the future, there'd always be that thing of, well, what will cars look like in the future? What's that? And
right,
you see,
right.
And Sid Mead, of course, was doing a lot of those kind of designs, the concept cars that you'd see in the car shows, and which they never would actually put into production. So it's like, shit, where are the cool cars? And then since I started the idea of doing Space Command, my thought is always, okay, what will make it different? What will make it distinctive? What will make it its own thing? And I realized that, most of the science fiction shows, they don't have cars. I mean, like The Expanse, you don't see a futuristic car, or Battlestar Galactica, they didn't the Galacticar, or whatever.
Right,
So,
right.
so when Tony came to the table and said, I build cars, it's like, cool, let's do it, and
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about the Space Command car and where we are now with that. So go for it. You tell me your whole process with that, Tony.
So first things first, with any vehicle, I have to make sure that it was in good running condition, because otherwise it's just a pretty piece of junk. You know what I mean? So I went through the motor first. I went ahead and got a motor from a Pontiac GTP, a supercharged motor, a 3800 supercharged motor. Now, I'm not trying to turn it into a race car, but I just couldn't help it, So I got a hold of a motor from one of my buddies, So he was like, hey, you want to get this motor in trans? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So he went ahead and got it to me, and I went ahead and went through it, rebuilt the heads, the intake, everything, cleaned it all up, put it back together. And then after that, we worked on the transmission. And after we finished with the transmission, we did suspension and brakes. So now we're at a stage where we got to start peeling off the Fiero and figuring out how to add our flavor to it. And when I say our, I mean me and my helper that I have here at the shop. So, basically it's unfortunate, but I think I might have to, I think I told you I had to pull the motor back out again, because it's going to be a whole lot of sanding, a whole lot of dust. So the process I'm going to be using is a spray foam and a rasp file. I know it's old school, but once we get a general shape, then we'll be laying fiberglass on top to create a mold, and then casting from the mold using more fiberglass to get our body shape.
That's cool.
So So I had some concepts, and I was like, kind of excited about getting to it and kind of showing you guys what I can do. I'm really excited about that. I know you thought I was gonna make like a Mad Max car or something. Like, no, that's not it. Like this is a more polished kind of thing. So show you.
So it won't be like three Cadillacs piled on top of each other.
No,
good.
Heck no.
much as I love Fury Road, much as I love that film, and but again, but actually, ultimately down the road, we're going to be building a variety of vehicles. So Eric started doing some concept drawings too, Eric Rodriguez, and we'll get down the road. We'll get to that. But when I learned that you wanted to take a run at the whole 9 yards, that's totally cool. Because one thing I've discovered is my method is find people who are talented and let them pursue their enthusiasms, and then I can course correct as need be. But usually I don't have to, because people love the idea of making something cool and distinctive, and so and then as soon as I put out the word that I was building a futuristic car, Len, you were kind enough to reach out to me and say, hey, I know a lot of people, I can be very helpful here, I can and that's enormously appreciated. So because it's funny, because before you came on, Tony, Len and I were talking about that whole process of building car bodies and all of that. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that, Len, in terms of what your what your thoughts are about all that stuff.
What I really liked is the fact that it isn't a 1980. What year is it? 1985 Fiero.
The one ours is it's an 80. Actually, it's an 86.
Okay, well, ours is an 85. I did a lot of research. 84s up to 88s, and 85. I wanted specifically. We weren't going to take out the engine. We got a 6-cylinder in there instead of a 4-cylinder, which is interesting about. Briefly, which is interesting what Gene Winfield said versus documentary stuff. They used a Volkswagen Beetle. That's a 4-cylinder car, and it was all metal with a little bit of fiberglass. Wow. So the documentary says, or the stuff that's documented says, it wouldn't drive very fast, wouldn't even go past 30 miles per hour. And then Gene says, no, it can go faster than that.
Yeah.
So I thought mine's going to be all fiberglass, which is a little lighter, but I'm not going to have that problem when it can't go past 30 or something.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research, and we made sure that it was a 1985 Fiero, beautiful condition. Everything works great on that, and it's up in Medford, Oregon right now. A person just like you, Tony, he builds race cars.
Oh, okay.
And he said, I can do this. This is really great. And we pulled in other resources to get it. Starting with, which is why I wanted to talk to Eric about, is we did a 3D drawing of this, a computer drawing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we were able to make styrofoam, what they call a plug. And then now we're in the process of making molds, which is fiberglass and so on.
Right.
So we needed exactly what you said, a good working car. We made sure we did that. And that's what I was going to ask Eric and you, is that instead of, it's a two-seater, Fiero's a two-seater. So if you sat in that car, you realize it's very small, very low to the ground. And in the movie Last Starfighter, it's gold wing doors, and the main character, Alex, sits in the back seat. So that worked for a Volkswagen, but a Fiero, you could do that. So we stretched it 12 more inches. So now you have more room pushed up, which now you can fit back someone in the back. So I didn't know, again, if Eric is doing that or not. I don't know. Do you have to know?
Well, the concept that I've been coming up with, I'm actually going to have it to where you enter from the front of the car. The whole front of the car opens up. And I know it's something that I was like, I've always wanted to do because the motor's in the back, you know? So the only thing that I have to work around is the steering linkage and everything. But other than that, it's a clear windshield right on the front, but the whole entire thing. So when you walk up to it, you literally press a button and the front opens up, and you go through the front and you sit down, and then it comes down on you. Yeah, so it's set up from the side. I just wanted something that was a little different as far as how you enter the vehicle, how it's dealt with. You know what I mean? Because I just wanted to be something different, you know.
That's super fun.
But I like the idea of the styrofoam plugs. That would save so much time if because I think Lenny, did you say that there was a CNC'd
CNC machine? I found a guy in Illinois because I searched Southern California, Northern California, and Medford, Oregon. Yeah, they were on and off. Yes, no, maybe. And then I happened to go online and saw this guy who does build cars, just like we're talking about, styrofoam plugs out of a CNC machine.
Wow.
I said, great. We got the 3D drawing. We sent it to him. He played around a little. He tweaked it a little bit and said, I can do it. So we hired him. Yeah.
Cool.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's
that's why it's so good to have these kind of conversations. And in a way, we're letting our fans who are going to watch this see how this process works. Because, again, you find people with the enthusiasm, then you connect them up, and they have, you know, I know this guy, or I know that guy, or there's this piece of equipment, or there's this shortcut, or there's this way of doing it. And that helps everyone involved, because all of us are trying to do the same thing, which is create something where everyone's going to look at that and go, wow, you know.
Right.
And because that's one of the great things about science fiction is there is that wow factor. And, you know, we all know it when we see it. It's like you're just watching this movie, and the story's carrying you along and the characters are carrying you along. And then there's this like super cool thing. It can be like, you know, a sonic screwdriver. It can be a car or a spaceship or any number of things, a tricorder. And you just go, oh man, that's so neat, you know. And now they're building like a Star Trek tricorder that'll really work, you know. So it's like, Jesus. But you know, but again, that's the fun of it. And so I'm thrilled to do this because, and again, the way I work with my team is I'll tell them, you know, something, and I'll say like, you know, we're going to build a car, you know, a Space Command car, and they'll all look at me like I'm crazy, and they'll say, oh, we can't do that. And then I just wear them down, and, you know, so it's like, you know, get used to my ideas, but
right.
It's really, really fun. And it's also neat because, again, for all of us who are working in this arena, we have the sense of being in a tradition. So whether you're talking about Ron Cobb or Gene or Chuck Barris or any of these people, you know, there's, you know, everyone knows the tradition that we're in. And then it's great when you can talk to some of these guys and really find out that process. Or like I met Sid Mead a while ago, and that's just, you know, amazing, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, you know, and he of course was the designer on Blade Runner, you know, and you know, so again, really, really cool. So but I think moving forward, we're going to have a really great time, you know, and I love your ideas. Put an air conditioner in that thing, though, you know, it's like it's going to.
I will. I will. I'll make sure that it's cool. I'm going to tell you one thing. You're not going to have a problem at all getting over 35 miles an hour.
Good, yeah. Yes,
I mean, the thing is 300 horsepower at this point. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, it's going to be a fun car. Mark, be careful. Don't get
Yeah.
crazy, okay?
You know, it's funny. It's funny because before I knew her, my wife Elaine had a '54 Chevy, and cops would pull her over and they would want to buy the car. You know, it's like they just pull her over and ask if she'd sell it. You know, she had '54 Bel Air, and so
Oh
it's
yeah,
hilarious.
it's nice.
Yeah. But no, this all sounds great. And another, of course, great icon, which is not exactly a science fiction car, is the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. That's another thing that those of us who grew up in Southern California, we'd see that thing tooling around the highway. You know, so,
Yeah, yeah,
What I wanted to ask you, Mark, when you first started talking about a space car, most moving cars are actually almost props. Most of them don't even run.
yeah,
They're there for looks. They sometimes push it in such a way, and then of course then they add CGI to make it fly or do
yes,
something
yes.
like that. So when you first talked about it, you had mentioned probably maybe you wanted it at Comic-Con or something
Yeah,
too.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you got a good working car, and now you got a souped-up engine.
yeah. I'm telling you, it because it's got a supercharger on it, so it
right.
when it's running, it has this, it makes this whining noise. It's like, what is that? So it already, it's gonna look way out and it's gonna sound way out too. You're like, what is that
That's
thing? You know? So
fun.
that's kind of the goal. I want to make something to when you bring it, people stand around and they're taking pictures with it and like, what
Yeah.
is this? You know, draw attention to what we have going on here. You know what I mean?
That's
So
great. That's great. And again, you know, I mean, all this stuff is just fun. And you know, I mean, on my end, I have to make sure the stories work and that it's like, you know, entertaining to watch. But like this, all this stuff is kind of like the icing on the cake, you know, and
mhm.
really fun. And you know, Len, you were mentioning that you were at the unveiling of the Cybertruck. And again, we're with guys like Elon Musk. I mean, this is, you know, here's his starship right here, and that could have been in a 1950s movie. I mean, you know, and so with the Cybertruck, we're getting back to that science fiction aesthetic. That thing could have been in a 1970s movie too, you know. So it's really cool, and you know, we're my brother Sean has a 4x4 we're thinking of buying, and it's like that's interesting. It's like I guess we could build a Cybertruck, you know.
Mhm, mhm,
You
mhm.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but so is there anything we haven't touched on that, like, I know the fans are going to be just eagerly waiting to see what we come up with, and you know, and science fiction is such a fun playground. So I don't know if there's something that either of you would like to mention as we kind of close our little conversation here. But I think we're really in good hands, and I'm thrilled to be having both of you in my life. It's you know, I never dreamed, Len, that when we were both at Hamilton High in our little green gym shorts, that we would be, you know, all these years later, building science fiction cars. But how cool, you know? I mean, it's, you know, I remember when I was a teenager, I was reading some comic book, and there was this guy in his 60s where his life had gone to shit, and he was like working as a janitor, pushing a mop, and he looked like shit. And I thought, gosh, I hope that doesn't turn out to be my life. And it's like, you know, like okay, you know, it's like things worked out. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, absolutely.
I gotta say this about the Twilight Zone. Not only are you perfect by bringing it from the 50s, late 50s, early 60s into this decade and beyond, okay, with your books and your commentary, uh, each episode was somewhat futuristic. They were
yeah,
talking about things in the early 60s that was happening sometimes in the 90s, you know,
yeah,
1990s, and we went beyond that. But when you look at the flying saucers, a lot of the flying saucers were props, okay, probably from Forbidden Planet or something like that,
yeah, yeah,
uh,
Mhm.
and spaceships. So um, the one thing about cars, but I don't want to say cars specifically. What I'm saying is about you, Mark, is that if you can relate to tell people to relate to this movie, Space Command, it's set somewhat in the back in the 50s kind of idea,
yes,
but it is today's stuff. It isn't necessarily Star Wars. It isn't Star Trek necessarily,
no,
but it's got content, especially the actors that are in there, the talent that's in there.
yeah,
Have them relate to it. So maybe something from that, from what Space Command, they will then inspire other people to go on
yeah.
and do what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea of it. I mean, Star Trek, the original Star Trek, inspired me not just to build this science fiction life, but to continue with compassion and a positive energy into the world to create a future worth living in. And you know, but also it's really fun because when I chose that 1950s science fiction aesthetic, I mean, it's pretty funny. Like this, let me show you this. I mean, look at this. This is a issue of Galaxy from the 1950s. This is the first publication of Fahrenheit 451, and here's Elon Musk. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's the same, you know, same basic motion. So it's like, you know, so this is still a very relevant design aesthetic. And
Right.
I was thinking when you start talking about Twilight Zone, there's actually one futuristic car in Twilight Zone, which is, again, the one from Forbidden Planet that Robbie the robot drives. And then they put it in an episode called the Rip Van Winkle Caper. And again, that's an incredibly cool looking car. And so, you know, so yeah, they mined Forbidden Planet pretty thoroughly on Twilight Zone. But I'm eager to see what we're going to come up with, and I'm really glad that the two of you are in conversation, because I think it can lead to some wonderful things. And you know, it's and obviously we're always here for you, Lenny, and you know, in any way we can help. I mean, I think it's fun. And I think another thing that's really great is that through this period of pandemic and all of these things going on that are so challenging, that we're coming to the world with a positive energy. And I think that's really important through hard times, to say we're not alone, we're all in this together, and coming with a good heart, but also creative enthusiasm, because there's something really just so cleansing and healing about saying, oh boy, I'm going to do something really fun today, something really cool, you know, that we can
Right.
share with the world. I think it's really great that we're all engaged in that. So, you know, I mean, because you know, Lenny, that when you drive out in that Back to the Future car, it's like everyone who sees it is just going to break out in a big grin. They're going to say, oh wow, that's so cool, because the magic comes into their life by what you're doing. So
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of Back to the Future, it's like from people from 8 to 88. Everybody notices the car. They get something out of it. They want to see the car, take a photo with the car. And I get enjoyment watching them be happy about seeing something that they grew up on as well, or their kids. And often, very often, someone will stop me and talk to me. They say, just yesterday we were watching Back to the Future, and the next day here comes a DeLorean time machine.
yes,
So it does bring a lot of joy to see people. We all grew up on movies, and people have grown up movies, and I think they still take it inside them. So
yes,
even though they can't be a Star Wars, they can't be Star Trek, they see and they feel that they are part of the family
yeah.
when they see new movies, such as in this case Space Command, that hopefully they'll fit into that idea of being a family. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So is there anything else you'd like to say in conclusion, Tony? I mean, I'm so thrilled that we're working together on this, and I can't wait to see what you come up with, and go for it. You're on the right track, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you, man, for bringing me where I can actually like play and fulfill my childhood dream of building things. You
I know.
know, eventually I'm gonna build that Star Wars. I don't even know what it's called. It's like a hovercraft or something. I don't know,
Called
but
the
I'm
speeder.
gonna build one.
Speeder,
Yes,
land speeder.
yeah,
Yeah, that was,
yes.
they had that one at the
Oh,
Cruise, and that was really phenomenal. That was great to see that. You know, it was.
yes,
But again, you know, it's like you see these items in these movies. It's like, wow, that is just so cool, and it becomes our world. You know, somehow we have a sense of ownership to it, and so that's great.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but it'll be funny if like one day you call me, Tony, and say I'm done with it, and you drive it up, and it just looks exactly like a Fiero. You know, it's just like that.
He like, yeah, what I did was I painted it and I went ahead and no, hell no.
Got face paint on it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right, right, jeez. Oh.
Great. Well,
But yeah, no, thank you though, man. I really appreciate just being able to be involved in this, and I'm glad that I met you. A lot of the information and knowledge that you give me, I've been able to pass on. So yeah, man, I'm just happy to be down with the squad.
yeah, they're great. They're great days ahead. Great days ahead. So, well, thank both of you for being in my life. You both bring such happiness into my world on a daily basis, and you know, I'm just really glad that we're all living the dream. So,
Yeah, yeah,
great.
man, this is dope.
Yeah. So we'll talk again real soon, and we're going to put this up on Mr. Sci-Fi, and you know, the world will see what we're doing, and you know, I think it's great that we can peek behind the curtain and see the people who are making all the magic that we're sharing with everybody. So thanks,
Okay.
guys, and we'll talk again real soon. You take
Thank
care.
you, Mark. Thank you,
Okay,
Mark.
Bye, guys.
peace out. All right, take care.